Hey everyone, Joe Graves. Welcome to the City View podcast. We really have something special today. Instead of a sermon, we have the opportunity to hear from members of our community as well as a few guests around stories of hope. So there's 4 stories of hope, and then I also included a special presentation from our friend Mel for our mental health spotlight. So we have individuals who will be introducing themselves and sharing. All of these are recordings from our worship service. Each one sharing in response to simple prompts related to what brings them hope, where do they see hope, and anything else related to hope. So it's beautiful, beautiful thoughts that I'm sure will encourage you. And so here they are.
I'll do this.
That's great.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dan Height. I'm the one you see up there most Sundays, and I'm happy to share with you my story of hope and where it is for me. When I was young, and up into my adulthood, my father was a Presbyterian minister for over 30 years, and in his office, on his computer, this great big old boxy CRT monitor had a screensaver with text scrolling by. You remember that? How that used to be? And on his screensaver, he had 2 things. The first one was from Joshua 1:9, which says, when God was reassuring Joshua, he said, "I hereby command you, be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened or dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." And the second thing that he had scrolling across his screensaver was not scripture, but it could have been. It should have been. And maybe it's in there somewhere. I don't know. It says, "You are not perfect. You will be perfected later." And there were a lot of things that went on in my own dad's life and in his world that caused him to choose these 2 things to scroll across his monitor, and that's what brought him up. But that was his screensaver. And I thought to myself, it made me think, like, what would be mine? And I'm thinking, well, I think there are 2 things also that I have kind of carried around with me for as long as I can remember that have brought me hope. And there are also scriptures, but I kind of like to dig, because I like to dig into what these mean. And so I just want to share with you a little bit. The first one on my screensaver would be at the end of 1 Corinthians chapter 13, which is that love chapter which everybody knows, and you hear it at all the weddings, about love being patient and kind and this and that. At the end of that, after he talks about when I was a child, I spoke like a child, and then I put away my childish ways. After that, he says, "For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now we know but just a portion, but then we will know fully, just as we are fully known." Now, I used to study biblical Greek, and I still kind of dabble in it, and I like to take the words out and look at them and chew on them a little bit and see what they actually are saying, because if you go back hundreds and hundreds and, well, a couple thousand years, and you actually look at what was written, it makes a little bit of difference, because what he's saying is he's not just talking about you just know a portion. You don't even know a piece of the pie. You know something out of a piece. So it's not even just a crumb of the crust. It's not even, it's an atom of the speck of a crumb of a tiny slice of this pie is how much we know. That's how much we understand. But later, then we will know fully, as we are fully known by God, which is a lot. The second thing on my screensaver is this, and we've all heard this one too. It's on all the Hobby Lobby blocks of wood. It's on people's T-shirts. It's on people's arms. It's Romans 8:28. And again, it's also been translated differently over the years. And this is how we've heard it our whole lives. Now we know that all things work together for the good of those who love God. And that's a perfect way for hateful Christians to tell you you're not good enough, and you're not doing good enough, and you're not doing enough. You're not believing and trusting and loving enough. The original Greek is a little bit more like this, and I think it makes a whole lot more sense. And it all has to do with prepositions. You remember anywhere a mouse can go? Over, under, through, around? That's how I was taught anyway. The original Greek says this: God works. Okay, first, that's different. God works all things, and here's the preposition, into good, according to the ones that know and trust and love God. We know, according to us, we know, because of our relationship, that we know that God works all things into good. And first of all, that takes us all out of it. The subject is no longer me. It's not about what God can do for me. It's about the good that God is doing all the time and everywhere. The good that God is working all things into, just like a potter works clay into something really magnificent and beautiful, right? And I think the part that humbles me the very most is that I may never get to see that good in my lifetime. Because it's not about me. That good may happen thousands of years in the future, but it is God's good. And God's good is gooder than any good that I could think is good. And therefore, vicariously, it becomes my good. But it was God's good first. And so I choose to hope in that.
Good morning. My name is Molly Rule. If I haven't had the chance to meet you yet, it's because I am usually downstairs with kids. I am the director of the City Kids program here. So if you haven't seen me, that's probably why. So when Joe asked a few of us to talk about hope, the first thing I thought of was what happens when you don't have hope? Because I went through a really difficult period in life right at the end of college. I shared about it in depth a few years ago, but to sort of quickly summarize, I was 22 and I had just had surgery on my vocal cords. And for a vocal performance and music education major, where voice was my major, this is not a good thing. And they anticipated that I would heal in a certain amount of time so that I could still do my student teaching and graduate on time. And in fact, that was not happening. I not only couldn't sing, but I could barely talk. And so I was asked to withdraw from school. In one meeting, had no advance notice this was coming. And so basically in one meeting, my future plans, my social network, my friends, everything just kind of went to dust. I was crushed. I was isolated. I felt hopeless. And this was kind of the proverbial last straw, because about a year-ish before that, I had started working through some trauma with a therapist, and so I was already kind of struggling, like barely hanging on. And then this surgery and having to withdraw from school, and so I basically just kind of spiraled into a really, really awful depression and lost hope. So one thing that gives me hope is a story that's in two of the Gospels, but when Jesus was teaching and he was in a house and so many people were coming to see him because he was healing them and saying good stuff. And so there was a person who was paralyzed. This is from Luke chapter 5, verse 18. Some men came carrying a paralyzed man on a mat, and they tried to take him into the house to lay him before Jesus. When they could not find a way to do this because of the crowd, they went up on the roof, and they lowered him through the roof on his mat, through the tiles, into the middle of the crowd, right in front of Jesus. When Jesus saw their faith, he said, friend, your sins are forgiven. When Jesus saw their faith, I think that is really significant, and I am not a biblical scholar, so you can check with Christy or Maggie or Delaney or Sam or any of the seminary people we have here and ask them what that is about, because I don't really know. I don't know how it works. But for me, at a time in life when I had no hope, none, I relied on the strength of other people around me who did. And I felt like they drug me on my mat through the roof to see Jesus time and time and time again when I wouldn't have been able to get there myself. I think Jesus recognizes the power of community and that sometimes we need others to help us see him. During that time, I had one friend who would call, and this is how old I am. I had an answering machine. She would call and leave me voicemails on my answering machine and said, I know you're not going to be able to call me back, and that's okay. And I know you're not going to be able to come to the thing, and then I probably won't see you for another week or 2 or 3, but just know that I love you and I'm thinking about you and I'm praying. And she would leave those, and I gave nothing to our friendship for probably 6 months. And she kept leaving those messages. And another friend, who ended up marrying Ben Rule, he would come over and sometimes do dishes when I couldn't get out of bed. And just those simple things. And I would just say, just tell me that God is real, because I don't feel it right now. And he would just remind me time and time again that Jesus loved me and that Jesus was with me. And even though I couldn't see a way out of this, that it wasn't going to be forever. And there was healing. And he took me to the feet of Jesus through the roof time and time again. So at this point, the good news is I'm through that time of life. And now I live with more freedom and more healing than I ever thought possible, really. And so I'm strong enough to help other people carry their mats. And as I look around the room, I know we've got folks in here who need to be carried and folks who are ready to do the carrying. And in fact, we all know you might feel one way today and another way tomorrow. But that's why we're all here together. And so my hope is that that we can provide that for one another. And if I do want to make one teeny disclaimer. Hoping for someone else does not mean saying things like, every cloud has a silver lining. just perk up. Those kinds of things, not helpful. But I think you know what I mean. And so I just want to let you know that I think that's the beauty of us being here together, is that we have people in both that can play both roles, I guess. And that we can take each other to the feet of Jesus and just pray for an encounter with him, because he's the one who can bring healing and peace and joy. And like John says at the beginning of his gospel, the light shines in the darkness and the darkness has not overcome it. So thank you. And city kids, it is our time now to walk so slow and calmly down the stairs.
And we have more exciting people that we're going to hear from this morning. We have with us this morning Mel Bjorgen, and she's going to tell you all about who she is and what her specialty is. But this is connected to our Christmas Eve offering. As I said, this year, every year, I'll start with that. Every year, our Christmas Eve offering is sort of what they call a pass-through donation. So we collect on Christmas Eve for a particular organization or fund. Last year, if you were with us, we collected for the Mothers of Murdered Columbus Children. I can't remember what it was the year before that, but this year it is for our City View Church Mental Health Fund is what we're collecting for, to give that fund a nice boost this year and make sure we're going into the new year with a lot of funds to be able to help anybody who needs it. And that fund provides micro grants to people to connect them with therapists. You've heard us talk about this a lot, so hopefully you know kind of what I'm referring to with the Mental Health Fund. And then this month, every Sunday, we're going to have a little mental health spotlight moment in every service then, because it's a joyful season, of course, but it's also difficult. I just am finding the older I get, and I know that sounds goofy to say maybe, but every year is hard, guys, and it's not getting easier. So it's just, we have more memories, right? The longer we live, there's more accumulated. Anyway, so it's difficult too. And so we want to take time every week to kind of acknowledge that and include that in part of our worshipful celebration. There's so much to be hopeful for and so much joy, but then, it's difficult too. So anyway, Mel is going to share with us some of her expertise this morning. I think that's all I had to say about that. So come on up, Mel. And this is the mic for you.
Hi, good morning. It has been such a lovely service. Thank you for having us and welcoming our family. This is my family in the front here. It has just, my son Malachi. It's just been lovely. The music, the testimony. My heart has truly been blessed this morning. What a special and sweet congregation you have of people who just overflow with love for Jesus Christ. So thank you for encouraging my heart this morning. And what I have to say this morning kind of dovetails right in with the theme of hope. So as she said, my name is Mel Bjorgen. I work for a nonprofit right here in Columbus, over in Upper Arlington called Lost Community Services. Lost exists to be an installation of hope to those who are bereaved by suicide. So anytime somebody dies by suicide, a team of first responders will be called on the scene, and we will go and try to be as much of an installation of hope to the family who's just newly and freshly grieving as possible. It is a difficult and heavy space to be in and day out, but it's also a very necessary space. I don't know if you knew this, but here in Columbus, across the United States actually, but here in Columbus as well, since the election, our 988, our suicide and crisis hotline, have been flooded with calls for people who just need help in their crisis. And sometimes that happens it happens all the time, but when really big things happen, and people feel like they are not safe, these calls get flooded into the suicide and crisis hotline. And so I just want to talk real quick about what we can do as people, just regular people who aren't mental health professionals, to give help and hope to people who may be struggling with thoughts of suicide. So just real quick, just to share with you, I am someone who is recovering from PTSD. Those of you with PTSD know that it is a ongoing process. We will always be recovering. And so from the time I got out of my house, which is where I experienced most of my trauma, so when I was an adult up until just about a year ago, I struggled off and on with thoughts of suicide. And I came to a point in my life where I finally reached out to get the help that I needed. And then that's how I got connected with Lost, because I wanted to do something for people like me. And I'm the suicide prevention coordinator. I came here to do a training. And I'm going to give you a quick 2-minute training on how you can help people in crisis. People like myself who have had lifelong struggle with SI, and people who just have struggle with SI in the moment or are in a particular crisis. The thing that we can do, I like to tell people, is ask, listen, and connect. When you see that somebody is struggling with their mental health, ask them, hey, are you thinking about suicide? Or you could ask them something like, do you ever wish you could go to sleep and never wake up? Either way is fine, as long as they understand the question that you're asking. In this way, it's kind of relieves the pressure valve for somebody, especially if they are struggling, because finally somebody knows, hey, this person has noticed that I'm struggling. And that really is hopeful, right? When somebody sees you and sees your struggle and reaches out and asks. And then the next thing that you can do is listen to someone. How often have we ever sat and talked to somebody and they just kind of pretend that they're listening to us, right? They're into their phone, or they're saying, or they're looking over us, or they're glazed, or something like that. Practice your listening skills and really be into what they're saying. You don't have to be a counselor to listen. But in a way, listening to somebody and really listening is an installation of hope, because that is telling them, I care about what you have to say to me. I value what you have to say. And then once they tell you your story, you can say something like, I'm concerned about you. What can we do to keep you safe for now? And in that way is very hopeful too. because you're including yourself. You're offering them, you're not going to do this alone. We're going to do this together. And then also what it does is it gives them agency. You're not saying, I am going to make all the decisions here. You're saying, what can we do to keep you safe for now? You're allowing them into the decision-making process. But sometimes people in crisis do not know what the next step will be, especially if they're in a PTSD crisis or in a really serious mental health crisis. So it's okay to say, hey, here are some ideas. Let's go get you connected. And that's where the connect comes in. You always want to make sure that you can connect them to someone who can help them in a professional way, whether that be clergy who is trained in counseling, or it be a mental health provider. So what you can also do is, and not a lot of people know this, you can call 988 for the person and put 988 on speakerphone and be there with the person as the 988 operator talks to them and connects them to resources. So there's lots of things that you can do. But when we ask someone, when we listen to someone, and when we connect them with the appropriate resources, what we do is we're telling them, you are valuable. Your life is valuable. You are valuable to me. I want you in this world. I care about you. And that installation of hope in someone's heart is so, so important. So it just takes a little connection. And the reason why I'm standing here alive and well in front of you today isn't because people knew, oh, ask, listen, and connect. It's because people, just like you, intervened in my life and gave me hope to live and to see another day. And that is across the board, whether it was my husband, my very best friend, or a mental health provider. They all together came and said, hey, you're valuable. Let's get you the help that you need. So as we think about entering into this holiday season, let's really think and just look and know the people around us and know what they're struggling with and care enough to offer that helping hand. I know that it can be really difficult to make that initial ask. Are you thinking about suicide? It doesn't really feel natural, does it, to ask somebody that? But once you get over that hump of the nervousness of the question, what a blessing you will be to somebody to show them that you care this season. So thank you for having me. It's been a blessing already. So I'm looking forward to the rest of the service. Thank you.
I'm going to move this way a little bit. It makes me feel more important. So my name's Sam. If I haven't met you yet, it's not because I'm in the sound booth or downstairs. It's just because I'm socially awkward and introverted. So I'm Sam. Nice to meet you. I want to start with a quote from Father Gregory Boyle. And he says that his hope is that we go from here and imagine a circle of compassion and then imagine nobody standing outside of that circle. So today marks the first Sunday of Advent for many Christian traditions, and it's a season where we wait with hope for Jesus to come. But in our own time, it feels like government systems and societal structures often seem to fail those who need it the most. It's easy to feel disillusioned. We can witness policies that harm the poor, the marginalized, and the oppressed. We can see inequities in healthcare, education, the criminal justice system, housing, and it can feel like hope is just beyond our reach, as if the systems that are built to protect us are not serving their intended purpose. And to be clear, even though I can't vote because I'm not an American citizen, I do think government decisions are important. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "It may be true that the law cannot make a man love me, but it can keep him from lynching me." And I think that's pretty important too. But in these moments, the hope that I hold on to is that God's justice isn't limited to the halls of government or the laws of the land. Throughout Scripture, we see a God who's not distant or far away, but a God who's present with us, especially in our suffering and our struggles. In the incarnation, what the Message Bible calls God moving into the neighborhood, God makes it clear that love isn't just an idea or a far-off hope. It's something that takes on flesh and blood, something that enters into the very real and messy struggles of human life. Jesus, the Word made flesh, doesn't stand apart from the pain and injustice of the world. He steps into it, identifying with the marginalized, the oppressed, and the broken. And in this, we find a deep and abiding hope. God is with us, not as a faraway force, but as a companion in our pain and struggle. So when the larger systems feel like they're failing us, local compassion gives me hope. It's in neighborhoods and homes and churches and in communities where the gospel of love is lived out that I see real change. This is where the church is called to be the hands and feet of Jesus, not waiting for a perfect government or a flawless society, but rolling up our sleeves and meeting the needs around us. God's work is often carried out through the actions of ordinary people like us. People who are willing to love and serve and advocate for justice in the places where we live. So local work doesn't always make the headlines, but it's often where deep transformation can occur. Whether it's teaching community members how to make a Thanksgiving meal, which we did on Wednesday last week, violence reduction efforts, or a group of people surrounding someone who's grieving. The local church can and does make a profound difference. And then it's in these spaces of compassionate action that I find hope that the kingdom of God is not a far-off dream, but a reality that we can help bring about here and now. So as people understanding and following the way of Jesus, we understand that hope isn't something that's passive, it's active. When we bring God's love into our neighborhoods, we're continuing the work that Jesus began, healing and restoring and fighting for a more loving world in the places where it's most needed. We trust that God is at work in ways that we can't always understand or measure. Hope, then, isn't about waiting for someone else to fix our problems. Hope is about being the hands and feet of God right where we are, doing the work of justice and compassion in our own communities. It's about believing that God has moved into the neighborhood, healing with us and working with us, and that our small acts of kindness and love have the power to change lives and over time transform the world. So let us continue to love and serve and advocate for those who need it, knowing that God is with us in this work and that through us, God's kingdom can come to earth as it is in heaven. Thanks.
I have been given the unfortunate task of going last when there's no time left. But I'm also very verbose, so that 4 minutes was tight. So I'm the last speaker on Hope today, and I'm glad to hear that there's kind of common threads throughout about hopelessness and community and how we can find inspiration. So for me, I find that there are 3 main components of hope. First, you have to have some sort of purpose or meaning, some sort of problem to fix or a passion. Secondly, you have to have a way to achieve it. And third, you have to have the motivation and inspiration to be able to act on it. And I don't know about you all, but that first one, finding a meaning or purpose or people to help, I do not have a problem with that. I actually have the opposite problem, especially during December, where I'm like, all right, more. I will go through the fast food line, stop sleeping. I will find all the time in the world to keep adding to my plate of things to do. And the problem is I go from very hopeful and inspired and excited to overwhelmed and angry and resentful and just exhausted. And I burn out. And I complete this cycle multiple times a year. And what I learned is I started asking myself, why? Why do you keep doing this to yourself? And there's this great book I'm going to recommend if you resonate with what I say today called The Disease to Please. And it sounds really sweet. But for many of us, it's sort of this psychological flaw where we're just afraid that we're not enough and we're unworthy And every day I start at 0 or negative points, and I have to earn people's love and respect and be generous enough. And so the book is great at calling out 2 main reasons, especially for me, why I keep repeating this cycle. First, I am a people pleaser with very unrealistic and unhealthy boundaries for what it means to help others. And 2, I am far too self-reliant and refuse to ask others for help because my problems must pale in comparison to other people's problems, so I should try to do it myself. For me, fulfilling the needs of others is a magic formula for gaining love, hope, approval, and self-worth. And I think that will protect me sort of subconsciously from being abandoned or rejected, because who can hate the most helpful person or the nice person? And the real answer is, it's not about you when other people reject you. The book has this quote that says, "You may choose to be a martyr and sacrifice all of your own needs on the altar of your family and friends, but in doing so, you are neither demonstrating nor proving that you are the most unselfish or the most pious, but merely the most self-destructive and psychologically flawed." And I think it's about finding that balance when you're trying to help people. And I think for me, while the book gives a lot of really tangible ways to find that balance and talk about boundaries, one of the most important ones for me to take away is point to you. Stop trying to do it all yourself. I am not the only person that faces a particular problem, nor has a particular passion, so I should really stop trying to do it all alone. God created us to commune with him, so he wasn't alone. Adam got Eve. And no offense, but Jesus didn't walk into every town being like, I am the Messiah, I am alone. He got 12 friends to help him out because sometimes even he needed people to commune with and help him out. We are designed to be in community, but that's kind of scary for people who have been abandoned or hurt or let down by people in our life, because you have to keep being vulnerable again. I also find, and many of you might resonate with this one, I'll say, I'd love to have that person help, but they are not as committed as I am. They will only give it a C+ or a B+, and I would give it an A+. And I have bad news, but those are all passing grades, and they would have probably all been adequate. So sometimes I have to remember that it's adequate and you have to let other people in, because you're gonna burn out if you keep giving A+ on all the things. So to remind me of the power of community, and also why you need a community to help maintain your motivation and to effectuate change, I turn to a poem called The Low Road by Marge Piercy, and it reminds me of this, so I have some excerpts today. What can they do to you? Whatever they want. They can set you up, bust your fingers, burn your brain with electricity, blur you with drugs till you can't walk, can't remember. They can take your child, wall up your lover. They can do anything you can't stop them from doing. So how can you stop them? Alone, you can fight. You can refuse. You can take what revenge you can, but they will roll over you. But 2 people fighting back to back can cut through a mob. A snake dancing file can break a cordon. An army can meet an army. 2 people can keep each other sane, can give support, love, hope. 3 people are a delegation, a committee, a wedge. With 4, you can play bridge, start an organization. With 6, you can rent a whole house and eat pie without leftovers or seconds. You can hold a fundraising party. 12 make a demonstration. 100 fill a hall. 1,000 have solidarity in your own newsletter. 10,000 power and your own paper. 100,000 your own media. 10 million your own country. It goes on, one at a time. It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again, but they said no. It starts when you say we, and you know exactly who you mean. And each day you mean one more. Thank you.